like to call the school committee meeting to order. It's 6:39 p.m. and our first item of business is public comment. And public comment, just to remind folks, is for a period of about 20 minutes. Any citizen wishing to speak before the committee shall identify themselves by name and address and shall speak for not longer than 3 minutes. No citizen may speak more than once without permission of the chair. Public comment is not a discussion, debate, or dialogue between citizens and the committee. It's a citizen's opportunity to express their views on issues of school committee business. So with that, we have 4 people who have signed in for public comment today. And our first one is Fritzy Nance.
Please, yeah. The mic is for WinCam. And I just would call to the committee's attention. You're going to hear some interesting stuff tonight. So we do have some special guests. And I have put a copy of the slide deck in the folder for this evening's meeting, which is McCall Food Rescue Pilot.
Thank you. Thank you, school committee and administration. My name is Fritzy Nace. I have worked with the school district as a consultant doing the recycling in the cafeterias and now composting. And over the years, I've worked with many students and have very frequently heard their eagerness to get involved and help reduce waste in the schools. So I know that this evening you'll be hearing a draft policy to update our recycling policy to a waste reduction policy, and I'm very excited about that. I applaud the town's decision to continue developing the cafeteria composting. This year we added Lincoln School from January on, and in September we're planning to get Morocco on board, and if the stars align, Vincent Owen. And I'm so pleased and proud to have some students who were interested and willing to come tonight to share some of the things they've taken initiative on. So I'm going to introduce Laura Turan, who has been the Ambrose Green Team parent leader for 3 children. Her oldest is a junior in high school now, so she's been at Ambrose for several years. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Laura.
Hi. So Laura Turan, 28 Lakeview Road, and I'm here just to support Leo here. He's a second grader at Ambrose, and he's at, his full name is Leo Casagrande, and he's at 24 Arlington Street. Yeah. And so he's going to talk a little bit about the styrofoam trays at Ambrose, and actually I think at all the schools. So.
And he has a friend.
Oh, and you have your friend Milo, right? Yeah. Is he? You're gonna speak to Milo?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. All right. Do you want to start, Leo?
Yeah. So, in the cafeteria, I always ate off of styrofoam trays, and they rarely brought in cardboard trays, and I thought it was okay because I thought styrofoam trays broke down in 2 weeks. But then around Earth Day in school, I learned that styrofoam never broke down, and I was like, what the heck? I thought it broke down really quickly. So then I wrote a letter to the principal saying to please stop buying styrofoam trays for the cafeteria because they never break down, and asking her to buy cardboard trays instead because they can be recycled. And then she said she'd send it to WITS, and they used cardboard trays for a few days, but then they just switched back to styrofoam. And I was like, so they didn't pay any attention to the letter. But then my mom got an email saying that Whitson's had trouble getting cardboard trays and that they'd try their best to not use styrofoam trays at the start of next school year.
Thank you. That was great.
I love math, so I counted. 36 school weeks in a year. I am guessing half of Ambrose students buy lunch. That's 215 students. 36 times 5 times 215 is 38,700. Ambrose is sending 38 3,700 styrofoam trays to the landfills every year. I've only been at Ambrose for 3 years. That's 116,100 styrofoam trays. That is not okay. It takes over 500 for the styrofoam to break down, and 6 months if we use compostable trays. My friend Leo's doing an awesome job. He is thinking of what is best for the planet, and all the second graders agreed with him inside his letter. Please support us. This makes a difference to our futures.
Thank you so much for those remarks. And I love the green shirts.
That is a really tough act to follow. Oh, my goodness. I'm Stephanie Hale. I'm a parent here of a Lincoln school student and a McCall school student, and also a Girl Scout leader of a 7th grade McCall troop. 3 of them will speak to you tonight about a food rescue pilot that they fielded at McCall Middle School, and I think I will just let them do the talking. They are Allie Hale, Leona Trezenka, and Sophia Liu. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Leona.
I'm Sophia.
And I'm Allie. We are Girl Scout Troop 72034, and thank you for taking the time to listen to us today. For our Girl Scout Silver Award, we did a 2-week pilot that consisted of setting a bin in the cafeteria where kids could donate their unopened food. We would then donate it to an organization called FoodLink, which their purpose is to rescue food that would otherwise be wasted and donate them to food banks and organizations. We did this for only one 7th grade lunch, and we collected 56 pounds of food and 291 total items.
We knew we wanted to work on something that could benefit the environment. The question was, what? Water conservation, energy conservation, so many options. But food rescue was a simple one because there were so many places we could work with. In the end, we decided to rescue food in McCall. We found an organization called FoodLink that took the food and even donated it to food insecure people. Not only was it awesome to know that we were doing something to benefit the environment and people in need, it was amazing to see how many people were so supportive of it within our school community.
Okay, so why is it important? Well, did you know food waste is one of the largest contributors to climate change? Every time you waste food, you also waste the water that grows the food and the fuels that were used to cook and transfer the food. This brings great concern because this harms our environment. So how does it affect you? A normal family of 4 spends about $1,500 a year on food that they don't end up eating. With that money, you can save and buy many nice things. We've also proven from our pilot that some of this food can be donated to food insecure communities.
We worked with the 7th grade for 2 weeks. Over this amount of time, we collected 56 pounds of food and 291 total food items. We used this information to estimate how much food could be collected in the span of 1 year, 1,008 pounds. And the full McCall in 1 year, 3,024 pounds. That's a meaningful amount of food.
We know that FoodLink has programs with Lexington and Arlington Public Schools, and the women's staff at these schools participate in the daily collection of uneaten food, and FoodLink picks it up from these schools every week. We strongly encourage the Winchester school system to do the same, at least in McCall and maybe the high school. Again, thank you all for listening to us, and I want to give a special thanks to Fritzy Nace for being an advisor to this project, and Mr. Lin for approving and supporting the project. We are open to questions if you have any.
Thank you. Our format doesn't normally have questions, but thank you so much for your presentations. If any members do have, if you want to break from our protocol, any comments or questions, I just say thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you all. You're such great leaders in the room who are really thinking about our future. So thank you.
Great job. Thank you.
And congratulations on the silver award too. Hopefully you guys are going to think of going for gold too.
And I was just going to say the first, oops, excuse that. I was the timer.
I timed myself. I think the first order, one of the early orders of business is considering the recycling policy. So if
Yes.
you are interested in hearing more about that, then.
And if not,
You can.
you
You're welcome to stay. Welcome to leave. We really appreciate you taking the time. Sorry we got off to a little bit of a late start tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so thank you again. So Dr. Hackett, do you have superintendent remarks?
I do have a few. First of all, just wanted to say that obviously we're in the season of ceremonies. So we've had high school graduation, we've had different award ceremonies, and we also have on Thursday night we have McCall moving on ceremony. So for those of you who might be able to make it, that would be great, I'm sure, for students to see you. And I'm looking forward to being in the gymnasium and being super hot. So I'll try to, not sweat myself away. We have also, we had the Lynch Elementary School had a closing party today that Mr. Hopcroft and I were able to get over. I don't know if anyone else was able to. I'm sure they're still going, I think, until like 7 o'clock. So it's a ruckus affair. Great turnout, and had some really nice comments and conversations with some Lynch staff, some parents about some, bittersweet to see the old building but know what they're getting. And it was just it was a really nice way for the community to get together and have that conversation. The food trucks were there, so there was in a ton of kids, so it was really nice. I also wanted to point out that I do have, and I put into the folder tonight, a PDF of our enrollment update as of today. We still have some open enrollment decisions to make, a handful that are remaining, and I put that in there tonight for your information. And I will come back on at your next meeting and give you a little bit more, or have a little bit more of a conversation, and a few different points that I just would want to, or things that we want to point out to you, that we're keeping an eye on, need to continue to keep an eye on. So our numbers are growing. And we're not alone. I know that there are other communities around us who are also seeing an increase in some of the numbers. So, so that is in your folder as well. That's it.
Thank you. Well, those Lynchies know how to party.
They do.
They really do.
If they tear the building down, then we'll just get a head start on the renovation, right?
They're dancing away.
Yeah, but no, it was great to see them all there, and it was very sad, sort of bittersweet, because it's such a well-loved building, but certainly its time is there. I wanted to thank you, Dr. Hackett and Mr. Mahoney, for your decision to move the Winchester graduation, the high school graduation, inside. I think the heavens opened up and validated that decision, so that was wonderful.
It's the happiest I've ever been to see it rain and thunder.
A lot of other great things. Karen Connolly at Whiffy retired, so it was nice to see the passing of the torch there. Pride Fest, a whole bunch of things going on in town. It's been a really, really busy time. Two quick updates, I guess, as we get started. The committee assignments, I had said I wanted to get to at this meeting, but I haven't had all of my conversations, so we will do those on the 27th. And I think, as people know, the select board is making a decision or considering direct purchase versus PPA, and so I had said we would hold off on bringing a vote for that until the 27th as well. So just a heads up on that. That's it for me. Our student representatives, I don't think are.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh.
I just wanted to jump in and thank the GSA at the middle school and the Spectrum at the high school for their involvement in the Pride Fest on the Common, and thank the advisors of those two organizations, Melissa Morello, Emmett, and Sarah at the middle school, to see the enthusiasm and excitement on the face of the kids when their teachers were able to be there to support them in sharing their experiences with the community. It was just, it was a really lovely part of Pride Fest, and it was nice to see our staff there as well. So I really appreciate it. Jen, can you help me with Emmett and Sarah's last names? I know Miss Morello at the high school.
Emmett Jorgensen and Sarah, I'm not
not sure which Sarah was involved. There's a couple from McCall. There's a couple that have been involved, so I'm not sure. Sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. Put you on the spot anyway.
That's okay.
I blanked in the
It
moment.
might have been
but-
Sarah Stenson. Was it Sarah Stenson that was there?
Were there any other community updates? Okay. All right. Then with that, we'll move on. The next item of business is our consent agenda. I understand that a member would like us to pull the May 22nd minutes to look at doing some more on that, tweaks. But I believe the rest of the acceptance of grants and gifts and minutes from the May 1st and May 9th meeting are all acceptable to be on here. So if we could have a motion on the consent agenda.
Go ahead.
Motion to accept the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
And I'm going to do a roll call vote. I don't think
You
Mr.
don't
Brady.
need to.
Mr. Brady's not here yet.
No.
He will be joining us remotely as he drives here, and so we'll need a roll call for that. But since he's not yet joined us, we can just do a voice vote. So all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any
Make a
opposed?
Request?
Yeah. So don't me to say consent agenda passed. Yes.
I had asked Dr. Linema if she just might say a word about the really significant grant from the Griffin Foundation for the visual arts. It's a significant amount of money with some exciting opportunities. So I appreciate it was on the consent agenda, but it's really pretty cool. And if if we can recognize her for a moment, just put in a plug, it's exciting.
Dr. Elenema?
Sure. So as you probably know, our art department has had a strong relationship with the Griffin Foundation for a long time, and the Griffin Museum, and they have pledged to even support our school district more, which is an awesome opportunity for us. Typically, you've probably heard us 1,000 times at the table talk about how frugal we are with the kinds of technology. It must be sustainable, what we do. So almost everything is on Chromebooks for the students, but there are a couple of areas that we recognize. Good education just needs to be on a couple of specialized either programs or devices. And for things, for example, like CAD, we need to be able to run the CAD software, so we need heavy-duty machines to do that. And in the art department, there is just nothing better than a Mac, loath as I am to admit that, it's true. So the iPads can really do fabulous things that can't be done on anything else. And as a district, we've just said that's not something that's sustainable for us ongoing to continue to fund at this level. So amazing that the Griffin Museum is able to do that, which will allow a lot more of that creativity technology-wise that happens at the high school and more at the middle school, mostly at the high school, but not as much at the elementary levels. So this is an awesome opportunity to expand it there. They do know and have written in practically blood that they accept that, you know, these devices are not going to be able to be sustained by the district. So if they want to be able to continue with this work, it's a grant through them or someone else. But in the meantime, we'll have lots of students that will be able to have this experience with the iPads and with the creative programs that they can use for art with them. So we're excited about this opportunity and so appreciative. It is quite a bit of money, so.
Yeah. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you. All right, so now we'll move on to reports, updates, and action items. And the first one is the first reading of policy EDE on recycling. Ms. Bolognese, do you want to
Sure.
share that with us?
Hold on. So policy EDE is our recycling policy, and the last time that this was updated was in 2016. And Fritzie Nace and Ken Pruitt. Fritzie joined us, Ms. Nace joined us during our public comment earlier. Worked on a revised recycling policy in conjunction with Andrew Marin, our senior programming manager for planning and business operations. So this update to policy EDE includes some general language and then also some more specifics on how Winchester Public Schools can reduce waste. and that came before the policy subcommittee on April 5th. So the recommendation coming out of policy subcommittee was to bring it to school committee for a first reading. And if you'll note, in the redlined version, there is a little bit more detail on how the district can extend its waste reduction efforts.
And with that, would you like, Andrew, you want to kind of just walk through some of the highlights of it, or?
Yeah.
So a quick update to the policy. It really just reflects more accurately what we do in a long kind of daily. And so the top part here, we no longer have to do some initial reporting that was at the town level when the policy was first adopted. So we eliminated that language. And then we expanded some of the areas that we incorporated in this policy. Some of the longstanding practices with reusing or recycling or surplusing equipment and furniture and technology in the district. And as well as what Fritzy had mentioned earlier, kind of the adoption and promotion of our composting programs throughout our schools too, that are kind of slowly coming back as we build the capacity at each school. So those are the updates, and kind of particular thanks to Fritz and Ace as noted, and then Ken Pruitt for their kind of guidance on updating this policy. So.
Any discussion, questions?
So I just have a quick question for Andrew. Leo had mentioned when he made public comment that there was paper trays, then styrofoam trays, then paper trays, and it sounded like he was saying there were supply chain issues that he had been told, which was really impressive for a second grader to know about. So could you just address like how we're going to meet this policy and what's getting in our way and how we're going to improve on that as
Sure.
those supply chain issues might.
Yeah, I think you summarized it perfectly.
Oh, thank you.
Right.
Sorry.
Right.
Yeah, better than I could
I was
say.
embarrassed.
I think we're going to try to see if we can buy more ahead of time. And so sometimes we order one product and it's swapped out at the distributor level. So we order through Cisco and they're swapped without us kind of knowing, but they provide something. So I think the hard part is some storage of these items, but we're trying to see if we can buy more ahead of time and focus on those compostable trays. And then we are making efforts as well, like in our design of the Lynch School, to have reusable trays that be incorporated into the kitchen there. And so the trays would be kind of used on plastic trays and come back to the serving line and be washed and then put back into service the next day. So that's ultimately our goal, is to be reusable instead of compostable.
And that's because we've been able to incorporate a full kitchen into Lynch Elementary,
Correct.
is that
Yep.
correct?
And kind of being able to design it from scratch and how to incorporate that.
Yeah.
And he's learned a lot about magnets on waste baskets that attract the silverware, that if kids happen to throw it out, it
kind of tap back
sticks
into
to the side.
So I grew up in the restaurant industry and kind of brought back some prior experiences there with our wait staff and saving dollars there too. So, yeah.
I was wondering if we'd have the trays in time for the Parkhurst Hills in the winter.
Yep. That could be a dual use. That'd be exciting.
Dual use.
Dual use.
Not the
That's
compostable ones, though.
Yeah.
No, that might be tricky.
It's fun for a couple slides, but
That's great.
But it's science in action.
It is.
It is.
Any other questions,
I
comments?
have one.
Yeah.
Well, it's an observation and a question. Is Fritzy still here? Oh, hi. So from time to time when we've done policy reviews, we tend to avoid reference to state or federal statute, because then those statutes can change and then the policy is sort of a little out of place, so long as whatever the policy is intended to address can sort of do it on its own 2 feet. So the observation I would share is that the CMR reference, which is 19017, I'm looking at that now, and I got this draft earlier today, so that's why I'm sort of late coming to this, but it really sort of establishes the authority of the Department of Environmental Protection. And I'm wondering if that needs to be in the policy, because it's a very lengthy section. And I also have some questions about, I mean, the language in here specifically applies to the department, so it doesn't apply to like a municipality that says, well, this is what we pledge to do in terms of our recycling goals. But there's a lot of language in here about, you know, the disposal of things like wood and metal and batteries and so forth. So is the intention from the policy subcommittee that we are treating those kind of materials in the same way that the DEP would? And if not, do we need to have reference to the CMR? So that's an observation and a question. Because I do believe, like, if there are things that we aspire to do as a district that we feel warrant policy, it's all, you know, keep it simple, stupid, right? And if there are things that we want to do because we think it's the right thing, then we can say so, unless there's some reason why we need to reference, you know, state regulation, legislation, or the federal level as well. So it's just an observation and a question. Not that there may be an answer right now, I just want to throw that out.
I was just going to comment that in the original 2016 policy, it references the Department of Environmental Protection's waste ban, and it lists those items specifically. And so I think the effort to remove those items is so that it's not zeroing in on specific items, and it gives us a little bit more flexibility.
So I would just say, if our intent is to be following the letter of that statute, then removing the words doesn't give us more flexibility, because if our intention is to comply with the statute, then that's what we would do. I mean, most recently, we've probably all read that there's now restrictions on mattresses. I actually thought it was interesting. I can still get rid of my mattress. I just have to give the transfer station a check for $15, I guess. So when that news broke, that was effective November of 22. I thought, oh, well, how's that going to work? So there are actually new restrictions from DEP on mattresses and textiles, which of course weren't even listed in that earlier version. So just, it's an open question, which is, you know, what's the intent? Because if you actually read that statute, there's a lot of detail there. Are we aspiring to comply with all of that? That's just my open question. Don't know that I have an opinion on it. I'm just trying to understand, because the reference is there, what is it that we're aspiring to do? And there may not be an answer for it tonight.
Any other comment from the committee, subcommittee? Or you're good?
I have a comment.
I would just say we did add in the specific reference. So I guess in the previous version, it did just say the waste ban. So I don't know that.
Did it reference the ban with no reference
with
to
no
what it was?
Reference? No, not even in the
so it didn't
references.
Describe it.
No.
Ms. Nance?
So I probably don't know the finer nuances of policy making for the school district. The original policy was implemented as part of the requirements for receiving a grant from the DEP, so the language came from them. This update comes through a working group with the Mass DEP. We are not taking any money from them at this time to get this update, but just a reminder that the DPW and the town is responsible for the waste management at the schools, and they are required to follow those laws. So by virtue of that, I would assume the schools would need to comply as well.
Mm-hmm. Does that answer your question, Mr. Nixon?
I thought, Mr. Nixon, you were implying we might have a higher standard than the town, and how does the town comply with what we are putting forward?
Well, I suppose maybe I frame it this way. When we create policy, right, it's because we're articulating some aspirational goal, right? We're putting our values in writing. This is what we wish our district to do. I totally understand. Sometimes we do need to do some things to be eligible for grants and so forth. So if that train has left, to the extent the reason for that is sort of behind us in the rearview mirror, if there is a reason to update this, I guess my question is, have our expectations around recycling changed? Is there something we aspire to do differently or more broadly? Because that, to me, is sort of the question, like, what do we aspire to be doing differently? And then whatever that answer is, that should drive policy revision. I'm just asking the question only because when I see statute, I mean, I don't know what 19017 is, so I looked it up, and it's really lengthy and it's really detailed.
So
And just as a general rule, again, I would say generally school council has advised us best not to refer to regulation because then that can get changed and now you're not in conflict. If you can say what you want to say, right, without referencing statute, best to do it that way. So I'm not trying to criticize, I'm just trying to understand a little more about the motivation.
I don't think the motivation was that deep. I think what you heard tonight around composting and it was really partly focused on our efforts as we move forward with food waste. It was kind of part of the driver of this. To Ms. Bolognesi's earlier point, everything that was crossed out was in the earlier policy. We felt it was good to take out the references to paper, cardboard. I think part of my thinking around that as I went through it was the qualifiers. To this end, WPS will make every effort to recycle materials that would otherwise become waste. So we'll make every effort, meaning to me, those materials that we would use in the normal course of business that might be specifically identified in reference to in that CMR, which there are others that we wouldn't be dealing with, hopefully, that qualifies our intent. So, you know, I think it's helpful just to have the reference because sometimes when these kinds of things, when we try to roll them out, people kind of like to know, you know, what's behind this, where does it come from? But I appreciate the question.
I would suggest, given the presentation we had at the start of the meeting, when I was listening to those Ambrose students, I actually pulled up our Whitson's contract. And I was surprised and like I'm disappointed in myself for not sort of recognizing this earlier, that there's a lot of language like Whitson's will purchase, you know, whatever food is cheaper. I mean, I know a lot of that, I expect that. But there's nothing in our contract with Whitson's about disposables. And there should be, there could be, and there should be. So I appreciate the message that came this morning, and if I was to suggest something to add to this policy, which is really written sort of about the district, there might be an opportunity to make reference to the district and its contractors, because that's really an opportunity for us when we renegotiate a contract, we put a contract out to bid. If there are things we're looking for in terms of performance around recycling, put it in the RFP, then it goes in the contract, and then we don't have to have third graders writing letters to Andrea Phelan, right? So I think this is good, but we do contract out a lot in the district. I think there's an opportunity to make reference to that as well. That just might be a reminder to our business office, you know, when we're putting contracts out.
Yep. Yep. And the tonight was a first reading, so we can take the suggestions, and maybe policy said we'd probably need to meet again, so may or may not come back on the 27th, but.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I
Thanks for your
appreciate
work
the
too,
opportunity.
Thank you, Fritzy.
Thank you.
Oh, and VO has a green team, and they're working on composting for.
I'm
an
working with
upcoming year.
them on
Yes,
that.
that's
Yeah.
what I figured.
If it has to do with composting in the schools, I'm probably somewhere in there. Yeah, but we're hoping that all the stars align for VO to be ready in the fall. Yeah, thank you,
Thanks, Fritz.
Thank you.
and thank you for getting Lynch reusable trays.
Next item is consideration of approval of the updated policy JICFB for anti-bullying. Ms. Bolognese, anything?
So with this, school committee had voted the updated bullying prevention and response plan early last year, which references policy JICFB. However, we had not updated policy JICFB and run it through school committee. So this anti-bullying policy has gone to the policy subcommittee also on April 5th, and it just captures some minor updates in terminology. So we bring it to school committee. And the recommendation on April 5th was, I don't believe this has come to school committee yet. I can't think of all of our agendas. But the hope was that if we could bring it here for a first reading and possibly a vote if need be.
I think we got so excited about getting the anti-bullying plan done, which was, as you remember, multiple pages long, and a little bit overdue, that we just didn't happen to bring the policy as part of it because we were really under the gun to get the actual plan done. Most of the recommendations that you see in here, as already been stated, are language term changes to be consistent, but also I believe some of this is, what's in here is also recommended by MASC. Mr. Brady is on, just so the committee is aware.
Welcome,
And so,
Mr. Brady.
And also would participate in voting, so it would just have to be a roll call.
Great.
So can I ask a question? That these edits are really straightforward, and I think they're all actually guided by MASC recommendations,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And given that it's sort of towards the end of the school year, if others agree that it's very straightforward, we do from time to time, waive our 2 reading policy just to get something done and out of the way. And if administration would welcome that,
I
and
love how
other
you're
committee
talking right
members
now.
would, I would be happy to make that motion only to be helpful.
I would be happy to second that motion. This
So
is all
I
editing
move
changes.
that we waive our second reading policy for new policies and policy revisions so that we can take up action on the proposal for JICFB tonight.
Second.
We have to do a roll call vote. So, Mr. Brady, do you want to go first?
Aye. Thank you.
Mr. Nixon?
Aye.
Ms. Bolognese?
Aye.
Ms. Bergstrom?
Aye.
And the chair votes aye, unanimous, to waive the policy. So now, would
And
you
then
like
I
to make a
would
motion?
Or
Unless
Ms.
there are
Bolognese.
questions or comments, I would be happy to move that we approve the revision to JICFB, anti-bullying, as presented.
Second.
All in favor, Mr. Brady?
Aye.
Mr. Nixon?
Aye.
Ms. Bolognese?
Aye.
Ms. Bergstrom?
Aye.
Chair votes aye, unanimously passed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item on the agenda is recommendation of meeting dates for 23-24. And Andrew, do you happen to have the graphical picture that there's I believe a PDF in the shared drive
He likely does not. Let me
or,
see if-
or somewhere on the interwebs?
somewhere on the internet.
Um,
Hold on, Andrew. I'll see if I can. Is it in that folder?
Is there a new
It's probably,
version?
hold on.
No, it's just an easier to walk through version. Maybe is it in our leadership drive?
Yeah.
I think you'll appreciate it.
Hmm?
I think you'll appreciate it when we get it. It's the same information. It's just presented differently.
Okay, just shared it with you, Andrew.
Look at this real-time tech magic happening in front of us.
It's hocus pocus.
All right. All right, so, yeah. Zoom that into an appropriate
Oh, look at
amount.
Wow. Yeah, give you.
Okay, well, this one's, there's actually yet a newer version than this that's annotated, but the yellow boxes are the school committee dates. The green boxes on the left-hand side are fall town meeting. And on the right-hand side, in March.
As close as we could predict.
Yeah, well, in the fall, they're published dates.
Yeah.
In March, we have 2 elections. There's a federal primary on the 5th and town election on the 26th. So those are in green. Passover is the primary observed days begin there on the 23rd and 24th of April, and the gray days are our guess as to when spring town meeting might be held based on the changing of the month. And so you can see that we follow the roughly every other week model for our meetings, with the exception of the week of Christmas. And in January, we book all but the first Tuesday plus the 31st because of budget season, and we consider the 31st sort of a snow date if the 30th doesn't work or if we need an extra day. I believe that's reflected on the sheet as well, but I found it anyway graphically easier to look at our usual calendar. So is there any comments or discussion? Andrew, can you slide it down just like a row or two? Yeah. You can look at either version.
So the March 5th and the March 26th, well.
So it was.
I was wondering on the original version about the meeting every week in March.
That's
But
so the
it's
green.
just the 12th and the 19th?
Just
or
the 12th
it's
and the 19th.
Okay.
There are elections on the 5th and the 26th.
Okay, but on the sheet,
Yeah.
Oh,
it does say meeting on March 5th and meeting on March 26th.
okay, that's in error, so we should correct that. So that's on the narrative sheet or in the.
That's on the document that's linked to the agenda.
Okay.
Yes.
So, and this is why the graphical version is very helpful, because you can.
Yeah.
Although
we
this
could
is
see.
good too, so whoever owns this, can somebody like strike that or
Yep.
like can
What are
any
the
of us
dates
do
again?
it?
I'm sorry.
So
March 5th and March 26th.
Need to be struck.
Yeah, those
Yeah,
are.
it's actually the
those are
12th and the
elections.
19th.
Okay.
I was like, wow, we are really ambitious getting ready for town meeting.
Yeah, no.
And then can we look at December for a moment? So maybe just zoom out a little bit, Andrew.
5th and 26th, right?
For March?
March. Sorry.
Oh, yes,
it's
yes, 5th
March
and the
is 12th.
26th.
No,
Oh,
5th
oh,
and the
wrong
26th.
dates, yeah.
Those are-
Strike the 5th and the 12th?
And the 26th.
5th and the 26th.
Got it. Okay. Sorry.
It's 2 weeks in a row, 12th and 19th
Is when the meeting is.
is when the meeting is.
Okay.
So I wanted to look at December because I think about our budget development season. You know, we're voting a budget at the end of January. And is there adequate time after Thanksgiving to get there, to talk about goals and priorities, and for you, Dr. Hackett, to bring ideas to the committee?
Andrew,
Because
if
by the time we get to January 9th,
just,
you know,
November to
you're
January.
already, you're doing a lot of work on some priorities to get us ready for a vote. And I'm presuming at the meeting on the 16th, we're seeing almost like a final draft, maybe
Right.
a final draft on the 23rd. And that last week of January is our public hearing.
Right.
So when and this is sometimes just a function of when holidays fall, but I feel like in some other years, when we've looked at like just that one lone school committee meeting in December, we've all kind of looked at that and thought, is that really realistic? Should we be seeking to pick up a Thursday in that month for some budget discussion?
We can certainly put something on the calendar, and if we don't need it, not use it. I mean, it's probably better to hold things. But what do folks think? Well, first, Dr. Hackett, what do you think about the cadence? And would you prefer there to be another one in December?
Otherwise, I feel like we're going
Yeah,
to be
no,
accelerating
we're-
very, very
yeah.
quickly.
And I think the last couple of years, first year was us just learning the budget that we'd already that had been adopted. This year was really the first time this administration has really had a little bit more with the budget, and was learning and also somewhat up against it with some other difficult things that were happening at the same time, with contract negotiations, which obviously drives a huge portion of the budget itself. So I think it's a good suggestion. And this the question would be, I don't think we would.
So we met on the 6th and the 21st this year.
At the 12th.
Would it make sense? You know,
So
given,
it was the first and third week.
given Thanksgiving, you know, would it be more helpful instead of doing the 28th to do the 5th and the 19th? Give you an
Say
ex-
that again?
I was saying, would it be more helpful just to shift down the 28th and 12th, just shift them both out a week? Because how much work is getting done the week of Thanksgiving, it might give you some more time, you know, in the office to prepare before meeting on the 5th.
Like maybe the 5th and the 19th
Yeah,
of
that's what he
December?
said.
Yeah.
Yep, sorry.
Because otherwise you're back to back.
But he's
weeks.
also suggesting, Chris, that you take out the 28th of November. So
Well,
just meet once in November.
For the reason he just said, I sort
Yeah.
of agree. I mean,
Yeah.
it is Thanksgiving. There will be work going on.
Right, but it's a
Not
shorter
sure
week.
there's what needs to come before us. But, I mean, with your building-based teams, you're doing some early budget work,
Yeah.
right, in the fall. So I think the 5th and the 19th may be a better strategy.
Just a reminder, the 19th is the week before the winter break, so it all sounds good when we're sitting here in June.
Yep.
Yeah.
But when we start pushing up against that week, I'm wondering whether or not we do the 5th and the 14th as an option.
We will have those trays over at Parker's,
We will.
so we'll want
We
to hang
will.
around for a little bit.
Yes, that's my worry.
Dr. Hackett, I worry that that gives you enough time between our meetings, though, because
Yeah.
when we only had a week and a half during budget season, it wasn't necessarily enough time to turn things over. I hear what you're saying about, but I guess maybe the 18th, go early in the week then?
19th is fine, I just want to remind us all that that's,
It's earlier than the 21st
it is
last
earlier
year.
than the
Yeah,
21st.
it is.
Yep. That's fine with us. I mean, I think we're gonna be, not to brag, but we've got like 85% of the budget for next year done already now, because other than, everyone's been rolled forward on the contract. So, the remainder of our work will be, once the dust settles on hiring and where everybody ends up, we'll know to be able to roll them forward to the following year. Andrews and Mr. Rowe have done a ton of work on the salary book and doing some really nice things in terms of setting us up to get to certain places more quickly. So, I think in terms of what the discussion is on the 5th can be a conversation of, here's our preliminary thinking, here's some of our goals, you give us some feedback. We can be back on the 19th, and try to turn that into some drafts as well. What are you smiling about, Mr. Nixon?
River Street will be open and people will be living there. So don't be too confident to say it's all figured out.
Okay, I would appreciate 1 year here, all right, when we're just not.
I drove my
No,
son, I
apparently
gotta say,
not.
my oldest is back from school. He's 22 years old, and I drove him up to the Cambridge development last night, right off of, across from Whole Foods, and, he just couldn't believe how big it was, the lights are on.
It's
So-
unbelievable. Okay, makes sense to me.
Okay, so if
And
people are
then-
comfortable, yeah?
In April, did you just say that we were holding maybe that's it, the grade dates were just hold just in case for
No.
town meeting? Because they're
No.
all listed
The-
here
the-
as
Oh, yeah,
regular
I'm sorry,
meetings.
for town meeting, yeah. I thought you meant for
The
our meeting.
29th, the 2nd, the 6th, and the 9th, we're holding for town meeting.
That's our best guess as to when it
The
would
week
be.
of the 22nd is the first night of Passover. And so we were moving the meeting to Thursday night since that was the first.
Okay.
The Tuesday is the first night of Passover.
So then, on this list, we don't want Monday the 22nd, Tuesday the 23rd, or Wednesday the 24th as regular meetings?
Right.
Correct.
Okay, because it's on the list.
Yeah.
This is for discussion. Madam
Wait,
Recording
Are
Secretary.
those listed as meetings on the,
They are listed as regular meetings.
okay.
The 23rd through the 25th, and
The
then the 29th.
22nd through the 24th. Sorry, I might have said the wrong dates. But April 22nd, April 23rd, and April 24th are all listed as regular meetings.
So I think we'll update the other list.
I would
yeah.
almost suggest just strike them entirely off the list, because we always know when town meeting happens, depending on what's on the warrant,
Yeah.
we'll have a
Yeah.
meeting beforehand.
Yeah.
If we feel we need to.
Yeah, my intention
Well,
was
those were just listed as regular meetings. Those weren't even the pre-town meetings.
So the 19th, the 9th, the 22nd, the 23rd?
No,
No.
the 9th and the 25th.
The
9th and the
22nd.
25th.
No. The
Look at
20
April.
Listen, I want everyone to be quiet, and I want to hear from Ms. Bolognese, because she's the one making the point.
April 22nd,
Yes,
delete. April
Delete.
23rd, delete.
the actual meeting.
Yes. April 24th, delete.
All right, 22nd, 23rd, and 24th?
Yes.
Okay.
And then, so with what Mr. Nixon was saying, are we leaving in the pre-town meetings in April just as a placeholder, or?
I mean,
You have historically.
usually,
have-
I mean,
okay.
we have these conversations about when our regular meetings are, and we just understand when
Yeah.
town meeting is happening, depending upon what's on the warrant, we decide
Whether we need to meet
whether
or
we
not.
need to meet.
Okay.
Right.
Because sometimes it'll be things that we're a proponent on, and
Yep.
sometimes it's something we're not, but we have an interest in, so,
And
me,
sometimes
I
that
would
comes
just-
up at the last minute.
yeah, I would
Yes,
just
that's
pull the
true.
pre-town meeting stuff off the list, because it's just kind of how we do business.
All right, so we're going to pull also the 29
April 29th,
through the 9th.
May 2nd, May 6th, May 9th. But then, wouldn't you, would we, or did we say that November, the dates are already decided? So,
I did make the adjustment to, away from the 28th to go December 5 and 19.
oh, I know, but I'm just saying that
You're talking about
The-
town meeting.
there were pre-town meetings on several dates in November.
Got it. Do you want to take those off as well? So this,
Unless you know that those are,
Well, those are the dates, but I think for
There-
Mr. Nixon's point, it's just a regular expectation that prior to town meeting, we would meet. And so was there a suggestion that we don't have to list those on our regular calendar?
That's what we just did.
yeah.
So
We haven't
so-
And I hope we do that because I have to undo everything.
Just hit the back
Just
arrow.
because the business we're taking care of at a regular school committee
Right.
meeting is
Okay,
a different animal than, a
Right.
brief meeting
Yeah.
before town meeting.
So we can
Right.
remove those.
they're gone.
I think Mr. Hopcroft's intent was just to demonstrate with this calendar when they were, so that we could understand where our other meetings fell in relation
This is
to
good.
that.
I
Yeah.
like
Blocking
this.
off the
Yeah.
time in
I
his
like
calendar.
this.
Yeah, and I-
But but what Dr. Hackett's doing is
No,
just
that was my
making it
idea. This whole thing was,
Exactly, yeah.
fabulous.
Yeah, the crosswalk wasn't fully.
So could we just agree that we'll fix that
Fix
offline,
this.
fix that
Yeah.
offline to match
Yep,
this?
we will do
And then
all
we
of
can
that.
worry about that, all
With-
this later. We can
Yep.
edit by committee later.
Right, with, Ms. Berkshire, I just wanted to add to that we're going to move the November 28th to December 5th and the 12th to the 19th.
Yep.
And otherwise, we'll go off the yellow dates on this sheet will become the dates of our meeting. And the other
Sounds great.
colors are other meetings.
For Mr. Brady's benefit, because I don't know if you were actually listening as you were coming in the building.
I
Did
was.
you hear we
Yep,
added
I
two?
heard it all. Yep,
Cool.
nope.
And
You're like, please don't repeat it again.
you missed a heck,
enough.
you missed a heck of a conversation.
And Mr. Brady, I want to thank you. It was very handy to have the holidays on the next page of this document, so we were able to discover the
Reference, right.
potential conflict there. So thank you for that as
Okay,
well.
I would just ask the chair and any member who wants to participate in this activity to, because I made the changes on the itemized Word doc, just to make sure that's right before we go through the process of trying to do this.
Yep.
Because, okay,
Again,
thank you.
Will you send a copy?
What?
Will you send a copy?
You already have?
We have the copy.
I made the
Okay.
changes in real time with
Excellent.
my tongue out because I was trying to
Excellent.
not to
All
make
right.
the wrong thing.
Thank you.
Well, that was fun.
Was it?
Sort of. So next item is consideration of approval. We're doing just the nurse leader, Lynn Vazella. Dr. Hackett, do you want to?
Sure, I'll turn it over to Ms. Kirby. Tell us a little bit about our new nurse leader, who I know that you are excited, as we all are, to hear.
Thrilled. And Lynn is very excited. So Lynn Mazzella has been a nurse at McCall for several years now and really has taken on many leadership roles throughout her tenure there. And she's worked with Jen Markham in the past several years to really help get through, navigate the time that we had with COVID. And then just this past year, when we didn't have a director, she really stepped forward and took on many, many of the leadership roles, and she's just very eager about working with the nurses and pulling them together. We have some talent there, and we know that, when you have someone that's overseeing and you have that leader that's present, our program will continue to develop, and the culture will only grow stronger. So she's excited, we're all excited that she's ready to take on this, very unique role here in the Winchester Public Schools.
I'd like to thank Lori for her temporary service as the nursing
Yes.
director.
Temporary.
Semi-permanent.
Long temporary.
Right,
long-term sub.
right.
have a
I'd
question.
make a,
Totally support the recommendation, first of all. But with this move, how does this affect the current position that she has? What's the downstream effect of this for nursing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So presently, they are interviewing candidates, and they're very excited about one, so fingers crossed that that all goes according to plan. And just again, the way that the nurses work, you know, they all bring different things to the party. And so it's nice that Lynn will have the opportunity to work very closely with this nurse as she transitions, because we presently have a nurse over at McCall that she's a year in, has had several years working in private as well as schools. So, I mean, it's good, but just that consistency and Lynn knowing the community will be very beneficial for this transition.
And is the plan then to fill that vacancy at McCall with the new hire, or maybe, okay, so we're not moving nurses around to move a veteran nurse into that position? Got it. Okay.
And will Lynn continue working out of the middle school, or will she move over here to the high school?
That's another great question. This is the beauty of Lynn. She's very flexible. So depending on the need.
Okay.
So depending on who comes in and assumes this role, it would make perfect sense that a good amount of her director time would initially be spent at McCall with the new staff. But she's going to have a desk, a little area up at Lynch, and that will help as you know, the preschool is there now with the elementary at Lynch, and it will just give Donna Wallace, the nurse at Lynch, the additional support as they're making their transition to this new location.
Thank you. I'm happy to make a motion.
Any other discussion?
I'll
Okay,
second
good.
it.
Sorry, I'm confused. What are we doing? We're
So under
approving-
the statute, for some reason, under ed reform, school nurses were left under the authority of the school committee to appoint.
Okay, bizarro. Got
Interestingly,
it.
Yeah.
yes,
That's
along
all.
with superintendent and school business manager and special ed director.
Knew the other three, I didn't know the.
Yeah,
Well, lucky
yeah.
us.
I learned that the hard way, so.
I'll second it.
So I'm happy to make a motion to appoint Lynn Vizella as the nurse leader for Winchester Public Schools.
I second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Chair votes aye, it's unanimous. Congratulations, Lynn.
Yeah, and thank you, Lynn, for stepping up and taking leadership.
Our next item is facilities and capital projects, and Mr. Nixon, I apologize because I meant to connect with you and I didn't on the field trip to look at things here. Just given that we're going to executive session right after this, we're hoping to do your updates, but could we do the field trip portion on the way to executive
yeah.
session? Perfect.
But can I just ask a question before we move?
Can I make a statement before you ask a question?
Yeah, you
Might
know what
answer
I'm
it.
about to ask.
So, as was pointed out to me earlier, and appreciated while I was enthusiastic about remembering the nurse leaders appointed by the school committee, principals are not. So you're not actually considering approval of the appointment. I'm here to announce with a lot of excitement that we have hired Kathy Karen as the Vincent Owen Elementary School principal, effective July 1. You were involved in the process. Lori was certainly involved. Jen was involved. We are super excited. I think she has just the background that really matches what our needs are moving forward. We're very grateful to Lisa Cormier for the hard work that she did in not easy times. But Kathy comes to us with a lot of good experience in literacy. She's currently serving, or was serving, until she resigned from it, as the assistant principal in Andover. She is also a resident, for those of you who may or may not know that, and she had a son who graduated this past couple weeks ago. So we're thrilled to have Kathy coming on board and looking forward to working with her. We do still have the assistant principalship open, and she is a special ed assistant principal position. Kathy is working with us now as part of the process to help us make some decisions around that. So, super excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you. That's just the announcement I wanted to be sure we got out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I also would let the committee know before you do go into executive session, you will not be coming out as there has not been any ratification votes that I'm aware of from the WEA. I don't have any results, so you would not need to come back out in open session.
All right.
So, Mr. Hopcroft, to your earlier
Somebody's
point,
thrilled.
there is interest in a field trip, so we're allowed to do site visits under open meeting law. So I think when we wrap up tonight on our way to the executive session, there are some things that we'd like to give the school committee a moment to see. And we're going to touch on that here in just a moment.
And Mr. Nixon, before you start, would you like me just to read the future agenda items next meeting so you can just go right through?
Yeah, whatever you like.
So this is just jumping out of order for a second. Our future agenda items that are listed here, we have performance data, strategic planning and facilities workshop, superintendent evaluation, and our next meeting is June 27th. And that way the floor can be yours right up until the field trip. And we're not...
Two things to add to that list. So school handbooks and some update on where we stand with school improvement plans.
Okay.
We didn't do the school handbooks already?
We did the course of study.
Do those.
The handbooks, there are, we've learned a few things along the way this year, so we do want to spend a little bit more time, given that we don't print them anymore. It's just a tough time of year to bring handbooks. We want to make sure we're thoughtful about it. We want to make sure our policies are matching well, because we've done quite a bit of policy work. The anti-bullying plan, so there are updates we just want to make sure we catch in the handbook. So our intent would be to bring those to either mid-July or early August for consideration.
Mr. Nixon, you have the floor.
Thank you. So, can I ask Mr. Marin, can you pull up the memo for a moment? Dr. Hackett, I think, sent everybody a link earlier today. It's about 3.5 pages, so I don't know if everybody's really had time to review it. I'm not going to read. Oh, can I actually do this? Cool. Let's see. Bear with me. Oh, cool. Okay, thank you. Okay, so sort of carrying on an approach that Ms. Bergstrom and I sort of agreed to with Dr. Hackett a while ago, what we wanted to do was take these moments to kind of inform the school committee on capital projects and capital needs, so that when we really get down to brass tacks this summer and start talking about capital priorities, nothing's hitting us cold, and we have opportunities to ask questions either in the meeting or to follow up with whomever you would like. So we last had a capital update, I think it was on May 9th. There are a number of developments, primarily around the high school, that we wanted to call to everybody's attention, and they are relatively late breaking. So want to just remind the committee, this school, and this sort of blows my mind that it's been this long, but phase 1 of Winchester High School was open in the fall of 15. So, that was a long time ago. And although we think of it as a brand new school, we gutted the building down to the structure. We actually kept the structure and, of course, did a limited expansion. There were some elements of the building that we actually deliberately did not touch for a variety of reasons. And so in the instances that I'm referring to in the memo, some of those areas are now sort of raising some alarm. So the first is, and I think we have talked about this in some capacity, Ms. Bergstrom, previously, I think the school committee is aware that the resilient floor at the high school gym is in stages of failure. It has been a concern of the athletic director for 3 or 4 years now. In 2018, a study was completed to look at replacing the floor. One option was to go with resilient. The other was to actually pull this up and put down a wood floor. 2 different costs associated with that. That was back, I think, around 2018. At the same time, and I do think this is something Mr. Aria has maybe even talked to the committee about, the orientation of the high school gym is limiting us when it comes to multi-sport activities. Mr. Aria would actually like to turn the room, if you will, 90 degrees to better accommodate multi-sport activities. And as it's configured today, the MIAA will actually not schedule postseason, tournaments and so forth in the space. So these two are sort of interesting, because if the flooring is to be replaced, obviously what the flooring looks like kind of depends on the orientation of the room. So if we're going to turn the room, we kind of need to know that when we're replacing the floor. Turning the room involves new dividers that come down. That's a structural element. It's new backboards. It's new, it's padding along the walls, et cetera. And Ms. Bergstrom was with us, I think, in that walkthrough back in April to try to understand what is entailed. Replacing a floor is not inexpensive. So the idea of turning the room adds significant cost as well. Back in 2018, so really just pre-COVID, those estimates came in at $1.4 million. My understanding is Mr. Uria has kind of scaled back what he'd like to do so that the scope would be reduced. On the other hand, 2018 was 5 years ago, and we all know with the cost of escalation, what he has in mind today might in fact be $1.4 million. The EFPBC, as I mentioned in this memo, did direct the Engineering and Planning Department in, I think it was April or May, to solicit some proposals for design and engineering to work with Mr. Uria and Andrew here to come up with a better picture of what's anticipated and to also have an estimate developed. What has happened more recently in the past couple of weeks is that bond counsel, and by the way, we were going to pay for that just using some remaining high school funds. Bond counsel has since opined that both due to the duration of time that's expired since the high school was completed, but also the fact that it deals with an area that was actually excluded from the project to begin with. So the flooring you're seeing was there during the renovation, that it's really not appropriate to use remaining high school funds. But engineering and planning is still in the process of getting proposals. We expect to actually have those very soon. Once we get those proposals in, that's not to do the work. That's just for the design and kind of conceptual design package and a cost estimate. We'll bring that information back to the school committee. That itself may be a capital request that we want to consider over the summer. And so, Dr. Hackett, once we get that in, that might be something you might want to invite Mr. Uria to come in and talk about, once that is teed up. But that's kind of where that stands. A couple of the photos that are in the memo just try to show you where these surfaces are frankly just separating. The photo on the right, looks like a wood floor. It's not. It's like rubber. It's impregnated with color and pattern. So that's coming apart. And of course the floor is delaminating as well. So there's some trip fall hazards there.
And Mr. Nixon, Mr. Uria made the point that replacing that would be, again, with a resilient floor, because the cost of putting a wood floor in that space would probably be cost prohibitive. And also, one other motivation in turning the room was that the current bleachers that are there are not adequate for the space either. So we wouldn't be getting rid of bleachers that were otherwise functional for the space, that those need to be replaced as well.
That's right. So you're reminding me of something important. The bleachers that are there, they roll on these sort of, relatively speaking, small wheels. And because it's a resilient floor, they tend to sort of get a little gummed up. It takes more and more effort for those motors to work, and over time those motors have actually burned out. His understanding from the 2018 work, though, was that we can't just simply pull up this top layer and replace it. It's the underlayment itself that may also need to be replaced. And what you have there structurally is kind of like a tub. Think of it as a very shallow bathtub. And so there are layers below what you see, kind of like, frankly, the turf on Manchester Field, right? They're layers to this kind of sandwich. And so his understanding was a full replacement of a resilient floor like this may have some consequences in terms of how you get into the space, various doorways, so there may be ADA ramps that need to be considered. But if you went with a hard wood floor, the same would be true. One would be a little low, one would be a little high. These are all, on the one hand, they're weeds, but it also contributes to cost and complexity. And that's something that the design team would certainly look to bring into some focus if we move forward with that. But frankly, the more important issue that we want to make this committee aware of is during that same walkthrough in April, we visited the hallway outside of guidance in the nurse's office. It's one of several in the building on this main floor where the VCT, the vinyl composite tile, looks like it's bubbling. But if you step on it, there's no air underneath it, so it seems to be fully adhered. And this has been sort of growing in number and has been just a concern for DPW. So we authorized in early May some limited destructive testing to try to figure out what was going on. And to be very frank, we did not get some good news. So what you see on the left, and we'll visit this before our executive session, when we pulled up some tile, you see there in the image on the left, the gentleman's actually holding a couple of pieces. And to your right, in his left hand, it's actually a piece of concrete. And embedded in it is a piece of rebar that's reinforcing steel that has just sort of broken apart. It's a bit surprising to us that we're even finding steel so shallow, if you will, in the concrete. Concrete is, by its nature, very strong in compression. It's weak in tension. So typically you would see rebar in the lower third of a concrete element, kind of like the image on the right. So you're looking at a sort of a grade beam that's running below a slab. That rebar is where you would expect to see it. I'll talk about that in a minute because I'm kind of concerned that we are seeing it, but at least it's where we would expect it to be. So as we've done some destructive testing, what we've learned is that the bubbling of the tile seems to be from rust jacking. So that's moisture that's getting into the concrete, it's reacting to the carbon steel, and it's rusting. So it's actually pushing up the tile. And so this is a real concern of the EFPBC. Why is this happening? What's the source of moisture? What's the deterioration in the steel?
Can I ask, is this in the part of the building that was rebuilt that opened in 2015, or is this part of the original building that was kept from before?
Good question. So to be like really literal about it, I mean, everything was rebuilt. Everything was renovated, right? But the structure you're looking at is original to 1970. Yes. So we're looking at concrete that's, a year older than I am. Concrete is unique. It's one of the few building materials that gets stronger with time just due to the hydration of concrete. But what it doesn't account for is when you put steel in it and water gets to the steel, and then you get that reaction, obviously that then it can deteriorate. So the EFPBC has some real concern about the scope of this, the consequences of this. And so we actually had a pretty detailed conversation with Chris Conway, who's our building-based facilities manager here. He's terrific. He follows this very carefully and very closely. He presented to the EFPBC last week. We did authorize the use of high school, well, we haven't voted on it yet. We basically directed engineering and planning to get some proposals from a very strong forensics, civil and structural firm. This is in their wheelhouse. Winchester's worked with them before. I've worked with them before on other projects to get a proposal. And our expectation is we'll get that back in short order, and we would seek to use high school funds to cover that forensic work, to understand what's going on and what are kind of some of our preliminary options. And my understanding through engineering and planning is there will not be a problem with bond council to fund it that way, because this actually is work that was originally part of the high school project. So we want to call this to your attention, but and another and sort of important nuance of this, thinking back to the calendar we were just looking at, on the one hand, this is exactly the kind of thing for which we might go to capital and seek some funding. This is not likely to be the case in this instance because it's June 13th. And we typically would be having capital conversations literally in the next 3 or 4 weeks. We're not going to have that information in time. So, but we may have information in time for fall town meeting. So it is really premature to understand kind of what the options are for remediation and repair. Hopefully there'll be more than one. I think the EFPBC as a whole is a little concerned it's going to be a lot of money, whatever it is. But given the deterioration, this is not something we want to wait a year for, if that makes sense. We don't want to be having a capital conversation about this in July of '24. So I have spoken with Mr. McPeak, who's the chair of Capital. He was actually with us, you may remember, on the walkthrough. So the chair of Capital has actually seen some of this himself, has some concern about it, and appreciates that if, just due to the timing of how we develop information, if we need to go directly to fall town meeting, that's not, some calculated end run around capital. That's just sort of the consequence of when we have information. So that's what I wanted.
Why wouldn't we be going to consigli for this?
Consigli?
Yeah, the construction partners on the project. If this is part of the rebuild, wouldn't they be responsible for their work still? And if we're paying for it ourselves, then
far too early to suggest that we might have a claim against consigli, this is original structure to the building.
Yeah.
So if there are many examples, including the building I used to live in downtown Boston, where you've got poured in place concrete, where you've got embedded rebar. I used to live in a tower in the West End. I think it was built in 73, 74, and about 25 years later, there started to be rust streaks on the face of the concrete because it just took that long for the elements to sort of penetrate the concrete. And so there are examples of this where you can have poured concrete, embedded rebar, and it's fine for generations until it's not. So this is a high humidity environment as well under the slab, and we'll talk more about it when we do our little tour. But it's concerning to DPW that some of these things are happening. And the reason that I also just wanted to sort of distinguish the two images on the left are actually a completely different animal than what's happening on the right. The images on the left are in the corridor where we've got that flooring failure. So we have rust jacking kind of in the upper level of the concrete. The image on the right is actually in the A-wing. And in that instance, concrete has actually fallen into the crawl space below. You have exposed rebar that's rusting. And there's actually movement in the occupied space. And you'll see later where porcelain tile that appeared to have a hairline crack in the fall is now breaking into multiple pieces. So there's it's not just what we're finding, but it's what we perceive as like the acceleration of this.
Right.
So that definitely
But it is
a
in the
concern.
part of the building that's part of the remodel, and I would expect somebody to have been able to anticipate this.
So I think we need to, get our forensics folks
Okay.
on board to evaluate it. If there's something obvious that's tied, if causation can be tied to something associated with the remodel, that's obviously a conversation that goes a certain way.
Different direction.
But if not, it doesn't. So we want to make you guys aware of that. And then the other item that
Do we know
discussed.
is that just limited to one particular area, or do we know the extent of it?
So
is
we're
that
going to
what
talk
the
about this
forensics
on our
will do?
field trip a little bit. A lot of this is really just now kind of coming to light. So there are some areas of the building, like where the photograph was taken, there are some crawl spaces, like for instance on the right, that are a little easier to get to physically than some other parts of the building. Some of the deterioration that we've actually seen at the back of the building, where I don't believe anybody has actually managed to get back there yet. It's really tight. But the deterioration is very much in kind with what we're seeing in the A-wing as well.
Just a few questions on some of the things you talked about. For the gym floor, I'd appreciate having the full array of options. So what would a wood floor cost? What would Mark recommend? What would be the best investment long-term? Because it is a long-term investment. That gym floor lasted however long it lasted, and it's an opportunity to maybe do something that would probably be appreciated by the community. And then as a school committee, can we know what the total leftover project money is from the high school? I guess I'm ignorant. I had no idea that there was leftover money sitting around, and it'd be good to know how much it is. And then if we could have a list from the bond council of what it can be used on, because I think that would just be good information to have.
We can share that with you.
And I guess also, Mr. Nixon, I was reacting to the line in your memo about the EFPBC would look for school committee to support a fall town meeting appropriation on the next item. I mean, I would certainly be looking for that forensic evaluation before I could support anything like that, because since this is part of a new building, I hear you that we started in 2015, but I'm a little disturbed to see the deterioration you're showing in a new building. So I would want to make sure that that we completely investigate whether this is part of the reconstruction and why this wasn't anticipated by the contractor or anybody along the line, that this would appear later, because this this is a lot of what people fear in a remodel. So I want to make sure that we have the confidence of the community. And to Mr. Brady's point, if there's money left in the project, before I look for a town meeting appropriation, I'd want to know if we could use any of the leftover funding in the high school to cover any of these
They're nowhere near enough for that. We have.
Well, at least to give us a start,
Yeah,
though.
I think we have a very modest, like 5 figures left.
Yeah.
I think we had 6 last year.
I don't think it was a whole
We
lot.
used some of that money, you may recall, towards installing the period products in the
Yep.
bathrooms here, which again, that was actually, it was, on the one hand, they were in some drawings, but there was confusion about whether
Right.
it was contractor or owner provided. So it's not a lot of money. It's enough money to like hire a consultant to come in and look at something, but we don't
Right.
have funds left to actually do
Maybe our
anything.
forensic
Yeah, but to your point, I agree with
investigator.
everything you said. The purpose of that line is more to just be sure the committee understands that due to the nature, the concern the EFPBC has, the late breaking sort of nature of this, the fact we're not going to have information in time for capital, but we do expect we'll have some information in time for fall town meeting.
by
But we don't
November.
know what that's going to be.
Right.
So if the committee feels like, aha, here's a fix, this is the pathway, respectful of all the questions you've asked as well, Ms. Bergstrom, that might be something we would do. That's not really typical for the EFPBC, but, if it's seen as
Whoever we need to pass it on
if it's
to.
seen as an important thing to do and do quickly, we would obviously want to be a proponent of that. The other item that that's new that has come to our attention is starting in 2021 on the backside of COVID, DPW was discovering some pinhole leaks in what they call the floor trap primer line. So, a floor trap, the P-trap you have in your kitchen cabinet or in your bathroom cabinet, a trap is there to basically hold water. The water is there because it creates a seal so sewer gases don't escape. We have a lot of floor traps throughout the building. And so what we have are these sort of electronic valves that will actually fill those traps with water literally for just a few seconds every 24 hours because over time, it's an air-conditioned building, the traps will dry out. So in 2021, DPW discovered we had some pinhole leaks in some of these trap primer lines, and they were dealing with them as they came up. But what has happened really over the past 3 or 4 months is they're seeing more of them. And some of these lines are actually in areas that are actually not accessible. The other concern that they have is that, you can imagine the pipe downstream of the electronic valve only has water in it for a few seconds when that trap is being filled. But it appears that now actually on the supply side of the valve, under some of those pressurized lines, we're actually beginning to see some pinhole leaks as well. And so it's not, maybe it's okay to see on the screen, but in your memo, the areas where you see the green patina are areas where these leaks are occurring. So this is also a real concern, and we're trying to figure out why that's happening. There could be some chemistry reasons why it's happening. Could be some mechanical reasons why it's happening. We just don't know yet. And just like, the concrete issue I just mentioned, way too early to know what the issue is and what it's going to cost to fix, but we want the committee to sort of be aware that it's happening. So not great news on Winchester High School, but that's what's going on. And then lastly, just on McCall, 2 quick things. The contractor for the facade restoration is literally like ready to go as soon as summer starts. The entrances off Main Street will be affected. We're tearing up the concrete between the main entrance and the auditorium, so there's actually some flat work that's involved as well. So I'm not sure, maybe it's the door on the left towards the cafeteria that's now the entrance, but that'll either is figured out or will be figured out. It'll be a busy place over the summer. And then I, also just want to acknowledge, I think we all got an email. Well, I know I did. I think Ms. Bergstrom did as part of the, what is it called? It's the Civic Action Project. What is it?
Civic Action Project.
Civic Action Project. Students have reached out to us about a whole number of issues, and one of those is just the lack of period product dispensers at the middle school. This is something that, certainly I've been aware of starting like 2 years ago when we had some high school students approach us both about McCall and at the high school. High school was sort of low-hanging fruit because, number one, there actually was a design for them. For other reasons that I won't get into now, it was never installed, and we had funds to make it happen. And we had an architect that we could work with to be sure we were in compliance with ADA. So I'm really happy that we were able to get this work done at the high school. That started last summer. It was completed this fall. Based on our experience at the high school, what I just want to share with the committee is, I think for a very, very modest amount of money, and I think it would not exceed $5,000, we could, if the committee saw it as a priority, engage an architect to do some work at McCall, look at the existing conditions, look at the drawings, come up with a plan and an estimate. And then on the basis of the estimate, the school committee could decide how we might want to proceed. $5,000 does not get any attention at capital. If it's a school project, it's got to be at least 35 grand to even be considered. So, not that I want to put Dr. Hackett on the spot.
I'm sorry,
but
just, why would we need an architect to tell
I was
us where to
just
put
gonna ask that.
dispensers in a bathroom?
You
I
absolutely-
can just say at my school, I can speak from experience, they were put up and it was okay and it worked in an elementary school.
So, Mr. Brady, where that's happened in the past, we have ADA violations because we don't have the clear width to a bathroom stall, and in some cases, we're actually, penetrating rated walls, or there may be utilities behind the walls. And some of these accessories are actually pretty heavy, so they need like structural blocking. So it's important to understand what's behind that wall. Are there studs behind that wall? If they're not, that's okay. You can do something to support it. The cheapest way to do it, and maybe something you're familiar with, is to surface mount. And some of that is what we did at the high school over the summer. But in some instances, we actually could not. And so those actually required openings in the wall, again, to be in compliance with ADA. So,
Do we know we can't just surface mount at all the bathrooms in McCall?
we don't know anything, but I think it would be.
DPW can't walk through and.
That's what I'm saying.
I
would-
hear you, but I mean, we're talking about like screwing metal boxes on a wall.
I would not drive a screw through any wall of a school building without knowing what's behind the wall.
I hear you on the need for an architect. I'd love to have DPW walk through and tell us if they can do it. We know what the ADA compliance is now because we have the ADA report that tells us what we need to do to be ADA compliant, so
So when we got our first transition
measuring
plan,
tape and a stud finder.
when we got our first transition plan, about 10 years ago, I would argue we also knew what the requirements were, and we have had things like paper towel dispensers mounted on walls, and then our new ADA transition folks come in and say, that's a violation. So, I agree with you. It shouldn't happen, but it does. So, my recommendation would be to authorize, again, Dr. Hackett should weigh in on this, but, and I think we did the work at the high school actually for considerably less than $5,000, so I'm being very conservative. I think it would be smart to hire somebody to come in and say, yep, here's what you can do, and these are the actual accessories we would recommend, and here's what they cost, and you could either surface mount them, and if you do, this is where you put them, or if you can't, this is how they need to be installed, and then we could have an estimate. I think that would be the right way to do it. But the design work would not be a capital request. It's just not enough money. And that was it.
All right. So.
Any questions?
Questions?
Thank you, Andrew.
I have some questions I may save till, I have some questions I may save until I can see some of the stuff you're going to show us. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to that.
I would say that we are going to have to make our way through several hundred track and field participants and their parents.
Thanks for the heads up. I made my way through them on the way here.
Yeah. So just, we could also do executive session and
You're a
then,
runner, though, so.
and give them a chance to clear
They're my
out the
people.
space before we go on a tour. I'm just suggesting.
I concur with that suggestion. Let's get everything else done first, then we can do our tour.
But you are looking for a motion now to adjourn to executive session, are you not?
I am. and-
I will move that we adjourn to executive session for the purpose of conducting strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel, or to conduct collective bargaining sessions or contract negotiations with non-union personnel, and to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining with the WEA, as an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on our bargaining position as a committee.
Second.
I would amend that to say that we will
Not return to public session?
not return to public session
So
to,
moved.
yeah, except for the purpose of
Adjournment.
taking a facilities tour and adjournment.
So that's actually not required because we can do that outside of open
Okay.
meeting law.
So we'll adjourn directly from executive session.
Executive session.
Is
Yep.
there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 So we're adjourned. Mr. Nixon, are you comfortable with us doing a executive session first to let the kids